I've always believed that every person carries a story inside them, one they never share with the world. Some stories are too ordinary to bother telling, while others are too heavy, too dangerous, too fragile to see the light. My best friend carried such a story, and though I didn't know it then, it was destined to change both our lives forever. My name doesn't matter much. What matters is that I've known him for as long as I can remember. From the dusty playgrounds of our childhood to the crowded classrooms of high school, from sitting on rooftops at night dreaming about the future, to comforting each other in heartbreaks and failures, we had grown side by side like twin branches from the same root. He was my brother in everything but blood, my partner in mischief, my confidant. If there was one person I trusted more than anyone in this world, it was him. He had always been the kind of person you could lean on, the sort who'd notice when your smile was forced or when your laugh was hollow. He had this uncanny ability to read me, as if my heart spoke a language only he understood. That's what made the change in him so jarring. I started noticing it a year ago, though at first I couldn't put my finger on it. It wasn't dramatic, no sudden breakdowns or visible scars. It was subtle, like a shadow creeping slowly across a room. He laughed less. His silences stretched longer. Sometimes in the middle of a conversation, his eyes would drift far away, fixed on some thought so heavy that it pulled him out of the present. And when I'd ask him about it, he'd brush me off with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I told myself it was stress, maybe family problems, maybe something at school or work. Everyone goes through rough patches, I reasoned. But still there was something in the way he carried himself, like a man trying to balance the weight of the world on his shoulders. One night, we sat on the roof of my house as we often did when the weather was kind. The stars glittered above us and the air smelled of earth after rain. We used to talk for hours during those rooftop nights about everything and nothing, plans for the future, silly jokes, impossible dreams. But that night he was quiet, too quiet. "You're not yourself these days," I finally said, breaking the silence. "What's going on?" For a long moment he didn't answer. He just hugged his knees to his chest and stared at the sky. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost trembling. "Some things can't be said out loud." It was such a strange reply, one that made me uneasy. I wanted to press him, to demand he tell me, but something in his expression stopped me. His face was pale in the moonlight, and his eyes, they held a fear I couldn't name. In that moment I knew, whatever he was hiding wasn't small. It wasn't the kind of thing you tell your friend over a casual conversation. It was something deeper, something that cut into his very soul. I remember feeling a chill run through me. Though the night was warm, I didn't know what secret he was carrying, but I sensed that when it finally came out, it would test the very foundation of our friendship. And yet I also knew something else. No matter what it was, I wouldn't turn away from him. At least that's what I believed then. When I think back to how our friendship began, it feels like flipping through the faded pages of an old photo album. The images aren't perfect, but the feelings they carry are as vivid as ever. He moved into the house across from mine when we were barely 6 years old. I remember the day clearly. His family's truck pulling up, boxes stacked high, his mother shouting directions while he stood there clutching a worn-out teddy bear. He looked so out of place, so unsure, until I walked over with a football under my arm and asked, "Want to play?" From that moment on, we were inseparable. We grew up like brothers. Summer afternoons were spent climbing trees until our arms were scratched raw, our mothers yelling for us to come down before we broke our necks. Winters meant building forts out of snow, declaring ourselves kings of kingdoms no one else could see. Even when we fought, and we did often, it never lasted more than a day. By the next morning, one of us would show up at the other's door with an awkward grin and some silly excuse to make peace. School only deepened our bond. We sat next to each other in class, cheated off each other's homework, and whispered jokes until the teachers caught on. He was always quicker with numbers, while I had a knack for words, so we helped each other through. When we got into trouble, like the time we accidentally set off the fire alarm during a prank, our punishments felt lighter because we endured them together. But it wasn't just about fun and mischief. We carried each other through storms, too. I still remember when my grandmother passed away. I was 13, crushed by grief I didn't know how to name. He showed up at my door that night with nothing but a packet of chips and 2 cans of soda. We sat in silence, and though he didn't say much, his presence was enough. He had a way of sitting with you in your pain without trying to fix it, without making you feel weak for hurting. That was the kind of friend he was. And when his parents began to argue more often, voices echoing through thin walls, I was the one he turned to. He'd crawl through my window late at night, eyes red from crying, and we'd talk until sleep finally claimed him. I realized early on that he carried the weight of the world more heavily than most kids. He was kind, fiercely loyal, but there was a part of him that always seemed guarded, like a locked room no one could enter. Teenage years brought their own chaos. We discovered music, girls, and dreams that stretched far beyond our small town. We formed a band with 2 other classmates, even though we could barely play our instruments. He played the guitar and I sang. We were terrible, but we felt unstoppable, convinced we'd make it big someday. When that dream fizzled, we laughed it off, creating new ones to replace it. That was the beauty of our friendship. No matter how many times the world told us no, we always had each other to say yes. He was the type of person who'd stand up for the underdog, even if it meant getting into trouble. Once in high school, a senior tried to shove me against a locker. My best friend didn't hesitate. He punched the guy square in the jaw. We both ended up in detention, but I never forgot the way he stood there, unafraid, as if he'd do it 1,000 times if it meant protecting me. That loyalty etched itself deep into my heart, but with all his strength and warmth, there were moments when he pulled away, becoming quiet and unreachable. Sometimes during our late-night talks, I'd catch him staring into the distance, his expression unreadable. When I asked what he was thinking, he'd shake his head and say, "Nothing, just tired." I knew it wasn't true, but I respected his silence. Maybe part of me was afraid of what I'd hear if I pushed harder. Looking back, I realized those moments were cracks in the mask he wore. Cracks I ignored because I didn't want to believe my best friend, the boy who had always been my rock, could be struggling with something he couldn't share, even with me. Still, if there was one thing I was sure of, it was this. No matter what secrets he carried, no matter what walls he built around himself, I loved him like family, and I believed, perhaps naively, that nothing could ever break the bond we had forged over the years. It happened on an evening that began like any other. We had been sitting in his room, the warm glow of his desk lamp casting long shadows on the walls. The smell of instant noodles lingered in the air, and some old playlist hummed quietly from his speakers. It should have been just another night of jokes and stories, of the comfort that came from years of easy friendship. But I could feel it, the heaviness in the air, the restless energy radiating off him. He'd been fidgeting, chewing at his nails, avoiding my eyes. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "All right," I said, setting down my soda can with a little more force than I intended. "Something's wrong, and you've been carrying it around forever. Don't tell me it's nothing, because I know you better than that. Talk to me." For a long moment, he said nothing. His shoulders slumped forward, his head hanging low like he was physically struggling against the words caught in his throat. Then he whispered, "If I tell you, everything might change." I leaned forward. "Nothing could change us. You're my best friend. Whatever it is, we'll deal with it together." He looked up at me then, and I saw the fear in his eyes. The kind of fear that goes beyond embarrassment, the kind that eats away at someone's soul. His lips trembled before the words finally broke free. "I'm in love with someone I can't be in love with." The air seemed to thin around me. My mind raced. Forbidden love? A secret relationship? My first thought was that he'd fallen for someone already taken, or maybe someone much older. But when I asked, my voice quieter than before, "Who?" his answer nearly knocked the breath from me. "My brother." He paused, then rushed to clarify. "My stepbrother. Not blood, but it doesn't matter. It feels wrong anyway." I sat frozen, the words echoing in my head like a bell struck too hard. My best friend, the boy I'd grown up with, trusted with my whole heart, had just confessed to something I'd never even imagined. A part of me wanted to recoil, to reject the idea, because it clashed against everything I thought I knew about love, about right and wrong. He mistook my silence for judgment. His voice cracked as he continued, "I know how it sounds. I know it's messed up. I didn't want this to happen. I didn't choose it. But every time I'm around him, it's like my chest is on fire. I can't stop thinking about him even when I try. I hate myself for it. I've tried to bury it, to pretend, but I can't. And I couldn't keep lying to you anymore." I looked at him then, really looked. His face was pale, streaked with tears he hadn't bothered to wipe away. His hands were clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. He wasn't confessing with pride or defiance. He was confessing like a man confessing to a crime, waiting for the sentence to fall. Something inside me shifted. Yes, I was shocked. Yes, the weight of what he'd said unsettled me. But more than that, I saw the raw humanity in him, the pain of carrying a secret so heavy it nearly broke him. And in that moment, my love for him as my friend overwhelmed everything else. "You don't hate yourself because of how you feel," I said softly, my own voice unsteady. "You hate yourself because the world tells you it's wrong. But feelings, they don't just disappear because we want them to. You didn't ask for this." He shook his head violently as if to reject my kindness. "You don't understand. If anyone found out, my family, his family, everything would fall apart. They'd never forgive me. They'd call me sick, twisted. And maybe they'd be right. Maybe I am." I reached over, placing a hand on his shoulder. He flinched at first, then let himself collapse into me, his body shaking with sobs. I held him there, letting his tears soak into my shirt, my own chest aching at the thought of how long he must have been carrying this alone. "Listen to me," I said, my voice firm despite the lump in my throat. "You are not sick. You're human. You're allowed to feel things you don't understand. I don't know how we're going to figure this out, but you don't have to go through it alone anymore. You have me." He pulled back just enough to search my face as if testing whether I meant it. When he saw no disgust, no anger, only the truth of my promise, his sobs softened into quiet breaths of relief. "Thank you," he whispered. "I was so scared you'd leave me." "Never," I said. And I meant it, though a part of me wondered what this confession meant for the road ahead. Would I be strong enough to help him bear this? Would our friendship survive the weight of a secret that seemed destined to tear everything apart? I didn't know. But what I did know as I held him that night was that I would not abandon him. No matter how complicated, no matter how heavy, he wasn't alone anymore. After that night, nothing looked the same, even though on the surface everything seemed unchanged. He still walked beside me to class, still laughed at my dumb jokes, still showed up at my house with snacks and an old movie in hand. But beneath those familiar rhythms, there was a new silence between us, an unspoken awareness of the secret that bound us closer and yet set us apart. I thought the hardest part would be hearing his confession. I was wrong. The hardest part was watching how it consumed him, day after day, in ways he couldn't hide. Society has a way of creating cages, invisible bars of judgment that trap you before you even realize you've stepped inside. I felt those bars closing in on him. I saw it in the way his shoulders tensed when his stepbrother walked into the room, in the way he avoided eye contact at family dinners, in the restless tapping of his fingers against the table as though his body needed an outlet for the storm he carried inside. One night, I stayed over at his place. His parents thought nothing of it. We had been having sleepovers since we were kids, but I couldn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, listening to the soft rustle of his sheets as he tossed and turned beside me. Every so often he let out a broken sigh, the kind you only hear when someone's dreams have turned into battlegrounds. By dawn, when the light crept through the curtains, his face was pale, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "You didn't sleep, did you?" I asked gently. He shrugged, trying for a smile. "I'm fine," but he wasn't fine. He was unraveling. The more he tried to bury his feelings, the more they seemed to rise to the surface, choking him. He avoided sitting next to his stepbrother at meals. He'd leave the room the moment he entered. And when anyone asked him why, he brushed it off with excuses. Too much homework, not feeling well, just tired. I saw the confusion in his parents' eyes, the suspicion in his brother's, and I saw the shame in his own. One evening, we were walking home when he suddenly stopped in his tracks, his fists clenched at his sides. "I wish I could rip this feeling out of me," he said, his voice shaking. "I wish I could just be normal." The words cut through me. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was normal, that his heart wasn't a crime. But in that moment, I didn't know if my voice would be strong enough to fight against the weight of an entire world telling him otherwise. Because I was scared too, scared of what people would say if they knew, scared of how quickly love could be twisted into something ugly, something dangerous in the wrong eyes. We lived in a place where whispers traveled faster than truth, where judgment could turn violent. I imagined what would happen if his secret slipped out. The ridicule, the hatred, the rejection from his own family. The thought alone made my stomach turn, so I walked a tightrope between two truths, my promise to stand by him, and my fear of what that promise might cost us both. Sometimes, I caught myself wishing he had told me something simpler, something easier to carry. But then I'd look at him, shoulders hunched under a weight no one else could see, and I'd feel ashamed of myself. If I found his secret heavy, what must it be like for him carrying it alone all those years? The breaking point came one Saturday afternoon. We were supposed to be studying at the library, but he hadn't opened his books. He sat hunched over the table, his hands pressed to his face. "I can't keep doing this," he whispered. "Every day I see him and it kills me. I hate myself. I hate this house. I hate everything." His voice cracked, and the tears he had tried so hard to hold back spilled onto the pages of his notebook. People at nearby tables glanced over, frowning at the disruption, but I didn't care. I reached across the table and grabbed his hand. "Stop blaming yourself," I said fiercely. "You didn't choose this, and you don't have to go through it alone. Let me be here for you. Let me carry some of it." He shook his head, his grip tightening on mine. "You don't know what you're saying. If people find out, they'll think you're just as messed up as me." "Then let them," I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. I don't care what they think, but in the quiet of my own heart I knew I did care. Not about being judged for supporting him, but about how merciless people could be. I cared because I wanted to protect him, and I wasn't sure I had the power to shield him from the world. That night when I got home, I lay awake thinking about him. His tired eyes, his trembling voice, the way his whole body seemed to shrink under the weight of his secret. I hated seeing him like that. Broken, cornered, drowning in shame for simply feeling what he felt. And yet, beneath all my worry and fear, there was a stubborn flame inside me. It whispered that friendship meant more than comfort on easy days. It meant standing in the fire with someone, even if you got burned too. I didn't know how the story would end, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would not let him face his struggle in isolation, no matter how afraid I was. If the world wanted to break him, they'd have to come through me first. After the breakdown at the library, I realized something. Silence would destroy him faster than judgment ever could. He had already spent years trapped in his own mind, carrying his feelings like a curse. If I was truly his best friend, then I couldn't just sit back and watch him unravel. I had to become the place where he could lay down his burdens, even if only for a little while. That night, I went to his house uninvited. His parents were in the living room half watching a sitcom and didn't question when I slipped upstairs to his room. He was lying on his bed staring at the ceiling, music playing low from his phone. He didn't even move when I sat beside him. "You can't keep going like this," I said quietly. He blinked at me, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. "What choice do I have? I can't stop feeling what I feel. I can't tell anyone. I'm trapped." I swallowed hard, then forced myself to say what I had been holding back for days. "You're not a monster. You didn't choose this. Love isn't some switch you can flip off. It just happens. And maybe it's complicated, maybe it's scary, but it doesn't make you evil." His lips trembled as he turned his face toward me. "How can you say that? Everyone else would call it wrong." "Because I know you," I answered firmly. "I've known you my whole life. I've seen you be loyal, kind, brave. Whatever feelings you have, they don't erase the person you are, and I refuse to let you believe otherwise." For a moment, the silence between us was heavy. Then slowly, the tears slipped down his face. I reached over and grabbed his hand. He didn't pull away this time. Instead, he squeezed it, clinging like a drowning man finding something solid to hold on to. From that night on, something shifted between us. He began to lean on me in ways he hadn't before, not because I had all the answers, but because I didn't ask him to hide anymore. When the world felt too loud, too sharp, he came to me, and I listened. Sometimes we sat in silence. Sometimes he poured his heart out until the words tumbled into sobs. Either way, I made sure he knew. My presence wasn't conditional. We started taking long walks together in the evenings. It became our ritual, slipping out after dinner and wandering the quiet streets while the sky faded from orange to deep blue. Sometimes we joked, teased each other about old memories, laughed until our stomachs hurt. Other times he spoke softly about the war raging inside him, the way his heart raced when his stepbrother brushed past him in the kitchen, the guilt that followed, the longing that made him hate himself. On those nights, I never interrupted. I just let him speak, let him spill out every thought that clawed at him. And when he ran out of words, I'd remind him again, "You're not alone, not while I'm here." There were nights he'd call me past midnight, his voice trembling through the phone. "I can't sleep. I can't stop thinking." I'd whisper back, "It's okay. Talk to me." And so he did. We'd talk until the sky began to pale with dawn, sometimes about his secret, sometimes about nothing at all. It didn't matter. What mattered was that he no longer had to face the darkness alone. Slowly, I began to see changes in him. The shadows under his eyes didn't vanish overnight, but there were mornings when he greeted me with a genuine smile, not the forced one he had worn for months. There were afternoons when he laughed so hard he had to wipe his eyes, the sound filling me with a fierce kind of pride. He was healing, not fully, not perfectly, but piece by piece. And I realized something too. Supporting him didn't weaken me. It made our bond stronger than I thought possible. We had always been close, but now there was a depth to our friendship that went beyond childhood memories or shared mischief. This was loyalty forged in fire, trust deepened by vulnerability. Of course, I still had fears. Late at night, when I lay awake, I wondered how long we could keep his secret safe. I worried about the day when whispers might catch us off guard, when someone might notice the way his gaze lingered on his brother. But whenever doubt crept in, I thought of the look on his face when I told him he wasn't a monster. That spark of relief, that fragile flicker of hope. I'd protect it at any cost because the truth was I couldn't imagine a world without him. His pain was my pain, his laughter my joy. And if being his anchor meant carrying some of his storms, then so be it. One night as we sat on the rooftop again watching the stars, he turned to me and said quietly, "You saved me, you know." I don't think I'd still be standing if not for you. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a grin. That's what best friends are for, right? But inside I knew it was more than that. It wasn't just friendship, it was a promise. A vow that no matter how heavy his secret, I'd help him carry it for as long as it took. I had always thought of his brother, stepbrother to be exact, as just another figure in the background of our lives. Someone who drifted in and out of our circle, polite but distant, never the center of our late-night talks or reckless adventures. But after my best friend's confession, I found myself studying him differently. Every glance, every word he spoke felt suddenly heavy with new meaning. It was strange. I began to notice things I'd never cared to before. The way his eyes seemed to linger on my friend just a fraction longer than necessary. The way he sometimes laughed at jokes that weren't all that funny. His voice softer when it was directed at him. Small signs easy to dismiss, unless you knew the secret. And now that I did, they burned with possibility. Still, doubt gnawed at me. Was I just projecting? Wanting to believe in something that would ease the ache in my friend's heart? Or was there truly something mutual beneath all the awkward silences and hidden glances? One evening, I found myself at their house again. It was supposed to be just another hangout. Pizza, games, the usual escape from the chaos of the world outside. But tension simmered beneath the surface. My best friend avoided his brother's gaze, his movements clipped and nervous. His brother, on the other hand, seemed to hover around us without quite knowing what to do with himself. At one point, when my best friend had left the room to grab drinks, his brother turned to me. His expression was unreadable, his hands fidgeting with the seam of the couch cushion. "You've known him forever," he said quietly. The weight in his tone startled me. "Yeah," I answered carefully. "Since we were kids." He nodded slowly, eyes fixed somewhere on the floor. He's different lately, quieter, like he's carrying something too heavy for him." My heart raced. Was this the opening? Did he know? Did he feel it? I hesitated, then asked softly, "And what about you? Are you carrying something too?" He looked up at me then, startled as if I'd seen through a mask he hadn't realized was slipping. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence thickened, stretched until I thought he might shut down completely. But then he exhaled, his shoulders sagging, and said, "It's complicated. I didn't push, at least not yet." But his words lingered in my mind. Complicated? That wasn't the kind of word you threw around lightly. Later that night, as we walked back from the store, the three of us together, I caught the way his brother's hand brushed against his for just a second, barely noticeable, like an accident. But it wasn't. I saw the way my best friend stiffened, the way his brother quickly shoved his hands into his pockets, pretending nothing had happened. And in that tiny moment, the truth glimmered between them, unspoken but undeniable. The hardest part was watching them both retreat into silence. My best friend drowning in guilt and fear, his brother hiding behind a wall of restraint, both of them too afraid to voice what their hearts had already confessed in glances and gestures. One afternoon, when I was alone with his brother again, I decided I couldn't let it drag on. Not if it meant watching my best friend suffer endlessly. You care about him, don't you? I asked quietly. He froze, eyes wide. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, I said gently, not accusing but urging. I see the way you look at him, and I know. I know it's not nothing. His jaw tightened, his chest rising and falling as though each breath was a battle. Then he whispered, almost brokenly, I do. I care more than I should. There it was. The admission I hadn't been sure would ever come. My heart clenched, not from judgment, but from the raw pain in his voice. You've been hiding it too, I said. His eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of shame and longing. Because what am I supposed to do? Pretend it's normal? Pretend it's not wrong? He's my family, even if it's not by blood. People wouldn't understand. They'd never let us live in peace. I thought of my best friend then, how he'd cried when he first told me, how he'd called himself a monster. How alone he had felt, and now here was his brother echoing the same agony. Two hearts tethered by the same secret, both suffering in silence because of fear. I couldn't take it anymore. You need to tell him, I said firmly. He thinks he's alone in this. He thinks you don't feel the same. Do you know what that's doing to him? His face crumpled, torn between hope and despair. And what if telling him ruins everything? What if it destroys the only family we have? It won't, I promised, though I had no certainty to back it up. All I had was faith. The faith that honesty, no matter how terrifying, was better than a lifetime of hiding. Days passed before anything shifted. But then, one evening, when the three of us sat together in a rare moment of quiet, something changed. His brother glanced at him, his eyes soft, unguarded. My best friend met the gaze, trembling but unable to look away. And in that fragile silence, something passed between them, something that no denial, no fear could erase. Later that night, my best friend came to me, his voice shaking. He told me, he whispered. He told me he feels the same. Relief surged through me like a flood. After all the pain, the isolation, the secrecy, there was finally a truth shared between them. A truth that might just heal instead of destroy. For the first time, I believed that maybe, just maybe, this story wouldn't end in heartbreak. The night they finally sat down to talk felt like standing on the edge of a storm. I could feel the weight in the air as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. My best friend sat on one side of the couch, his brother on the other, a gulf of silence stretching between them. I was there too, not as an intruder but as the anchor I had promised to be. Neither of them spoke at first. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Their eyes darted, nervous, desperate to say something yet afraid to begin. Finally, I broke the silence. You both know this can't keep eating you alive, I said softly. Secrets grow heavier the longer you carry them. But I promise it'll feel lighter once you say it out loud. My best friend's hands trembled as he twisted them together. His voice cracked when he whispered, I can't. I don't know how. His brother leaned forward just slightly, his own voice raw. Then let me. That startled both of us. My best friend looked at him wide-eyed, and for the first time his brother didn't look away. Instead, he spoke, every word breaking through years of silence. I've been afraid of this for so long, he said, his voice shaking. Afraid of what it means, of what people would say if they knew. Afraid of losing you, of breaking the family apart. But the truth is, he faltered, tears filling his eyes. The truth is, I love you. And it's not something I can turn off or bury anymore. My best friend let out a broken sound, something between a sob and a gasp, and his hands flew to his face. Don't say that, he whispered through his tears. You can't, because I've felt the same all this time and it's been killing me. I thought I was broken, a monster for wanting you. I thought if you knew you'd hate me forever. His brother's face crumpled as he reached across the space between them, his hand hovering in midair until my best friend finally let him take it. Their fingers laced together, tentative at first, then tight, desperate. You're not broken, his brother said firmly, and I could never hate you. Do you hear me? Never. The dam broke then. Tears spilled freely, their confessions tumbling out in jagged pieces. They spoke of sleepless nights, of stolen glances at family dinners, of the crushing shame that had kept them silent. They admitted to the guilt, the fear of being seen, the constant weight of feeling wrong. I sat with them in that moment, watching the two people I cared about most finally tear down the walls between them. It wasn't pretty, it was messy and raw, their voices trembling, their bodies shaking. But it was real. And in that rawness there was relief. "You don't have to decide everything tonight," I said gently when the sobs had quieted. "You don't have to map out your whole future, but you do need to stop tearing yourselves apart. What you feel, it isn't shameful. Complicated, yes. Difficult, yes. But love in its truest form is never something to be ashamed of." They looked at me then, both of them as if they had forgotten I was even there. My best friend's eyes were swollen and red, his brother's cheeks streaked with tears. But in their gaze I saw something new, a fragile hope. His brother was the first to speak. "What about the family? What about what they'll think? How can we ever explain this?" I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. "Maybe you don't have to explain it to anyone yet. Maybe the first step is just accepting it yourselves. Because if you can't look in the mirror and say, 'This is me and I won't hate myself for it,' then no one else's acceptance will matter. Start with yourselves. Heal there first." My best friend wiped at his face, his voice steadier now. "I'm so tired of hiding. So tired of pretending I don't feel this." His brother squeezed his hand. "Me too, I just want to be honest. At least with you." That was the turning point. For the first time I saw them truly acknowledge not just the love they felt, but the possibility that they didn't have to drown in shame because of it. The conversation stretched late into the night. They talked about boundaries, what it would mean to protect each other, how careful they would need to be. They admitted their fears about what the future held, but they also allowed themselves to imagine it, even just for a moment, a future where they didn't have to lie to themselves. And through it all I sat with them, reminding them whenever their voices trembled or their doubts flared that they weren't monsters. That love, however unconventional, wasn't evil. By the time dawn began to creep through the curtains, the air between them felt different. Not free of fear, not yet, but lighter, as though they had finally set down a piece of the burden that had been crushing them for so long. As I left that morning, I looked back at the two of them sitting side by side on the couch, shoulders brushing, their hands still quietly linked, and for the first time I believed they could build something out of the wreckage of shame. Because in the end, the secret wasn't just theirs anymore. It was shared, carried between the three of us. And sometimes that's all it takes to break chains, knowing you don't have to face them alone. It's strange how time softens things. What once felt unbearable, impossible to even whisper, eventually became something that no longer weighed on every breath. Months passed, and in those months my best friend and his brother learned to live without the constant shadow of fear pressing down on them. It didn't happen overnight. There were stumbles, moments of hesitation, nights when doubt crept back in and old shame whispered through the cracks. But each time they faced it together. They talked, they listened, and they reminded each other that love wasn't the enemy. Fear was. Slowly the fear loosened its grip. I watched the change unfold before my eyes. My best friend, who had once carried his secret like a chain, began to walk lighter. His laughter returned, fuller and freer, as if every breath no longer carried guilt. His brother, too, grew more at ease. His guarded silences replaced by a quiet confidence, his eyes brighter when they looked at each other. They were still careful, of course. The world outside their walls would never understand easily, and they knew that. But within their own space, they no longer lived in silence. And sometimes when I sat with them, I could feel the peace that came from honesty, from finally being seen without judgment. For me, being their witness, their anchor, was its own kind of lesson. I realized how fragile we all are when we carry secrets alone, how much strength it takes to speak them out loud. Loyalty had bound me to my best friend since childhood, but this journey had deepened it into something more, a chosen family, built on truth and the refusal to abandon each other. I often think back to that night when the secret first spilled into the open, when tears and fear seemed to threaten everything we knew. And now, seeing them sit side by side with quiet smiles, I know that every storm we walked through was worth it. Because what survived was real. Their love was not a curse, not a crime, not a shadow to be buried. It was a bond, complicated, yes, but no less human, no less true. And my friendship with him endured too, untouched by judgment, strengthened instead by trust. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Every painful secret once shared loses its power to destroy. Truth doesn't always make life easy, but it makes it honest. And in honesty there is freedom. As I look at them now, two people who once thought their love would ruin them, I don't see ruin at all. I see survival. I see courage. I see the quiet beauty of choosing to live, to love, and to stand unashamed in a world that doesn't always understand. And that, I think, is the happiest ending any of us could have asked for.